Well, let me begin by saying it's a real joy to be with you on this occasion. We have heard about the Koinonia family conference for a number of years now. There have been various individuals that have spoken here, either directly from Zambia or from within, who are Zambians, and we relate through emails and meetings. So for a number of years we've known about this conference. The challenge was always as to when there would ever be an opportunity to finally be with you. And the Lord, by His providence, has enabled us to be here on this occasion with my wife Felicitas. And I'm pretty sure, as has already been said, a number of you are familiar faces. I think this weekend we'll just be trying to bridge the gap between the last time we met and now. And it will be so, where is this child and what has happened and so on. Okay. The subject that I've been given to deal with is to do with child upbringing, but more specifically to deal with children in the sort of teenage years going into young adulthood. Primarily because that's where trouble really is. That's where the difficulties hit us, and things tend to go a little bit out of control. And so that's really what the subject matter will be all about. However, if you noticed on the schedule, it looked like I was going to first of all deal with the younger children, and then deal with those who are somewhere in the middle, and then finally deal with the young adults. The more I gave this material some thought, the more I realized that perhaps what I needed to do in this first session is to give an overview. In other words, what is it that we are trying to achieve in the parenting process? I think once we are clear about that from beginning to end, then tomorrow's two sessions, the one in the morning and the one in the evening, I will then try and deal with the matter a little more in depth in terms of the challenges and, of course, the joys. And when we're thinking about joys, we're thinking more primarily with the end product. Okay, your work is finished and you are happy with what the Lord has done through you, rather than the fact that you now feel, is this what God really wanted me to hand over to the world as a finished product after so many years. I think that's really what we want to deal with there. And as has already been said, what you have in me today, hopefully not the whole weekend, but definitely today, is the leftovers of running from conference after conference. But by tomorrow, with a good night's sleep, I think the batteries will be recharged, and it won't look like you are dealing with an old tire. Fine. Let's quickly turn to Ephesians and chapter 6. We'll begin with chapter 5. What's the most common version in here? King James? All right. No hard ones around here. New International Version? Okay, so New King James? That's not very helpful. ESV? I'm the only one. Okay, that's what I was hoping to avoid. So let's have, what was the second last one? New International. Okay, let's say whoever has New International to be the one to read for us. I'm hoping it was the most common. All right, just read for us from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, down to chapter 6, verse 4. Just to provide us with the context, I will really only be looking at verse 4, which will be the last verse in our reading for this evening, to simply give us a sense of the work that's on our hands. So any Neve enthusiast here? I thought I saw quite a number of hands for the Neve.
That was then.
That was they didn't know what it was. Okay, I think Mrs. Sue has handed over a Neve to the husband. So please, if you could read for us, beginning with verse 22 of Ephesians 5, all the way to verse 4.
Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, as I've already said, we will really concentrate on that last verse this evening. I want to begin by stating that one of the most awesome responsibilities given to us as human beings is really that of preparing an immortal soul for the responsibility of adulthood in later life. Those of us who are here as adults, we are a product of a lot of investment. Investment in terms of love, investment in terms of care, investment in terms of finances, investment in terms of education, investment in terms of discipline, and so on, for us to be what we presently are. But I think what makes Christian child upbringing an even greater responsibility, at least in terms of the way we feel about it, is that we are also preparing an immortal soul for the judgment day in the life to come. All of us would like to arrive on that day, survive the judgment day together with our children. Now, I don't know how, if our children do not end up in heaven with us, I don't know how we will still be full of joy in heaven. Somehow, we still will be full of joy. But surely, we want those that God has given us, whom we have loved through life, would love them to be with us in eternity. Now, when you consider the real power of the fallen nature with which a child is born, and also the negative influences of the world around the child, and then, of course, there is the sworn enmity of the evil one, the devil, who is all out to destroy that soul. Invariably, you begin to ask yourself the question, who is equal to such a task? Although when a child is born and friends and family come around us and looking at this little baby, everybody is saying, beautiful, beautiful. And we're all feeling very proud in that moment. It won't be long before you realize that all kinds of wicked schemes are bundled up in that little life. It won't be long before you hear a mother despairing because of the strong will of this little thing that is at this stage the size of a football. But clearly, the mother has realized that it's not an angel that I've brought into this world. That child has not yet begun to be influenced by the outside world. They don't know anything about Tom and Jerry on TV and so on. They don't know. But already they are kicking up tantrums. They are demanding that life in this whole family should revolve around me and so on. Right there, still very small. As I said, add to that, when the child now gets influenced by friends, by what's on the TV screen, and for our own day and age through the internet, I mean, you now have a difficult time on your hands. And as I've said, the evil one is bent to destroy that young life. A number of us have grown up with siblings who just could not be turned out right. And probably by now have completely made shipwreck of their lives. The devil got his way. And now it's our turn. It's now our responsibility to bring up children despite all these things. Yet, there is no running away from this responsibility. God has entrusted to us these young lives, and it's our responsibility to bring them up when we become either parents or guardians. God, as I'll be speaking a little later on, gives us roughly 20 years, obviously a little more, in order to, as it were, besiege this soul and ultimately produce that good that will be of benefit to that little child and also of benefit to the world. And because it is God who has given us that life, He will bring us to account over that life. He will no doubt want us to give an accounting. And that's the reason why the Apostle Paul brings the instruction that we have just listened to from the Bible reading. It's because it is to God ultimately that we are to give an account and not necessarily to a human being. You will remember from the context of the Bible reading that the statement, in fact, we skipped it, we started one verse after, begins with submitting to one another. Now, some people see that as implying husbands submitting to wives, wives submitting to husbands, but it falls short in the next one, because you can't have children submitting to parents and then parents submitting to children. Because the moment you do that, you have a kangaroo situation in your home. Clearly what is being put there is a structure in God's word. That there is a structure. And the structure is primarily a structure of submission, because it is primarily a structure of submission to God. He is the ultimate governor. But what you notice as you go through the structure of submission is that it seems to be related to God, whichever way you look at it. So wives submit to husbands, and usually you find a little phrase like "in the Lord," or "as the church submits to Christ." You're finding phrases like that because ultimately we are accountable to God. And even the husband who is providing leadership and headship, he is not a dictator or a tyrant, simply wanting to have his own way. He is doing it with a view that I am accountable to God as I provide leadership in this home. And that's exactly the same thing that we find between parents and children. It is to do with God primarily. And because it's primarily to do with God, as parents, you are filled with fear and trembling, especially when the child begins to exhibit signs of rebellion. Because you know that you will have an account to give to God. Well, for this evening, as I said, I want us to do a quick bird's eye view of the fourth verse that we looked at. And in doing so, is to simply give us a bird's eye view of our responsibility. And the first thing that I want to say, which fits into the bigger picture, is that in this matter of child upbringing, we must begin with the father figure. Or, where we are dealing with a single parent and it's a mother, we can say a mother figure. But I'll explain why I am saying we must begin with a father figure. It is because on this individual lies the ultimate responsibility. Remember, we are dealing with structure. And in the passage that we read, I have the English Standard Version, the misfortune of having a long version here, but I noticed it was very close to what you have in the Neve and so forth, so I think it should be fine. The phrase there is not parents do not provoke your children to anger, but fathers do not provoke your children to anger. The one who has ultimate responsibility over the home as head, not simply over the marriage, but over the entire household, is the father. And consequently, he is given that instruction. And it's not because the Apostle Paul was not mindful that there's a mother around, because if you just read a few verses before, as he quotes the Old Testament in verse 2, he says, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. So clearly, he had the mother figure hanging around somewhere, but when it comes to this instruction, he says, fathers, here is work that you ought to do. Now, there is nothing more important, please underscore this, there's nothing more important in a child's life than the establishment of an authority figure outside himself or herself. And that's a major goal that we work towards. For a child who enters the world, that little baby, I'm sure you know, unless you never had a baby, that the center of authority for the baby is me. The baby himself or herself. And the first task you already have there is to show that baby that, you are not the seat of authority. It lies outside you. Now, the way you do it with a child, little baby, is obviously different from the way you handle a young adult, and that's something we will be dealing with tomorrow, the Lord willing. But I'm saying it's the most important issue. And where this is amiss, you can be sure a recipe for disaster is already being cooked. It's a matter of time. If a child does not learn early enough that I am under authority, I am to live under someone else's laws, and I am to willingly and gladly acquiesce to those laws. If you don't achieve that, the police will achieve it for you. It's a matter of time. And the reason why we aim at this is because ultimately the goal of parenting is to train a child to live under the authority of God. Ultimately, that's the point. So that by the time my child is leaving home, daddy doesn't need to be there. He doesn't need to come like a prefect or class monitor or a policeman. Hey, what are you doing? No. Because I have learned to live under authority. And the point I'll soon be making, as I have learned to live under the authority of my Father on earth, I can move from outside, rather can move outside that authority and still live under the authority of my Father in heaven. It's the same thing. I have learned it, that this is the authoritative figure in this sphere, and therefore even when I move out, there is an authoritative figure in the whole sphere, and it is God himself. So that phrase that we often quote in what we refer to as the Lord's Prayer, our Father who is in heaven, needs to be sealed upon the conscience of our children. Once you've achieved that, you've finished your work, basically. Because your child can go out there, start up his own home, have his own job, maybe even move far away. I was going to say to the UK, but so, let's try again. China. And you will not have to worry, because the child learned readily to live under this authoritative figure of father in the home. Therefore, you know that even in Beijing, the child will still live under the authority of father. And therefore, authoritative figure is crucial. Obviously, especially when it comes to teenagers going into young adulthood, the mother figure struggles to provide that dominant authoritative figure. The teenagers going into young adulthood, they know exactly how to do rounds around the mother and get almost anything they want to get out of her. They just have to shed a few sentimental tears. Or just keep nagging. Ah, mom, come on, mom, come on. Ah, my father, come here. So it becomes a little more difficult because the female species were made by God primarily for the nursing role, like a nursing mother. They are the softer side of this joint effort. And that's just the way God has made us. And that's where the father figure becomes so crucial, the male dominant figure. And you see it happen at home. When the father is arriving, they just hear the voice outside, and everybody is getting into shape and so on, as though it's Idi Amin who has arrived. But what I do want to say, and this is crucial for those of us who are fathers, your own example under God's authority will speak louder than words. And we shall see a little more of this when we'll be dealing with teenagers into adulthood. Because they easily see the double standards. They easily see that, I think this God is not as real as this man says he is real. Because if he really is real, how come he has double standards for himself? And therefore, it robs you and the child under you the opportunity to recognize that there is an authoritative structure that they must live under. What do I mean by this? I think the worst example takes place especially with non-Christians who take their children to church and then zoom off to go and play. You get the point? So, at a certain point, while they're still kids, I mean, that's okay. They want to go to Sunday school. They're taking their back. Then they become teenagers. Now, hang on. It looks like if you are now grown up, church goes out of the window. So, they are no longer interested in church. You try to force them and you just create a third world war on your hands. Why? It is because they have seen the discrepancy between the words, church is important for you, go, and the actions. The person who's saying it's important for you himself does not show that it's important for you. Invariably, you lose any respect. Or, again, it's a very common thing with non-Christians, and it is to do with either alcohol or smoking. There was a time when Dad used to smoke before his conversion.